Aram in Hebrew means shining, i.e., the inhabitants of Aram who have tall buildings. Qs al-Fajr 7, it can be interpreted as a luminous city dweller who has tall buildings. This is similar to the description of a modern metro city. When we turn to Hinduism, we still find this king of Atlantis. In the Sanskrit books, we find references to a god called Devanahusa, whom scholars have identified with Dionysus. He is connected with the oldest history and mythology in the world. He is said to have become contemporary with Indra, the king of Meru, who was also deified, and who appears in the Vedas as the main form of the highest representation. The warm colors of the imagination are used in describing the greatness of Devanahusa. For the time he controlled the sovereign affairs of Meru, make his kingdom universal. Quote, here we see that the great god Indra, the chief deity of the Hindus, was formerly king of Meru, and that Devanahusa va. Nushas, Anishas has also been king of Meru, and we must remember that Theopompus told us that the island of Atlantis was inhabited by Meropes. Lenormand has reached the conclusion that the first people in the ancient world were the Mero people. The Vedic religion does not recognize idols, said Max Muller. Paganism in India is a secondary formation, a degradation of the more primitive worship of the ideal god. It is pure solar worship, as was true in Peru at the arrival of the Spaniards. It fits Plato's description of the religion of Atlantis. In the religion, Atlantis had reached all the great minds that underlie modern beliefs. They have reached a universal, omnipotent, great first cause conception. Atlantis had worshipped this one god in Peru and in early Egypt. They saw the sun as the mighty symbol, type, and apparatus of this one god. Such a conception can only come with an advanced civilization. It is then that science has realized the dependence of all earthly life on sunlight. The people of Atlantis had believed that the human soul is immortal, and that it will come back to life in its material body. In other words, they believed in bodily resurrection and eternal life. They were accordingly embalmed by those who died. The Duke of Argyll, The Unity of Nature, says, we have found in the most ancient records of Aryan evidence that indications of higher, simpler, and purer religious thought as we go back in time, to the end, in the very oldest composition of the human voice that has come down to us, we find the divine spoken in sublime language which forms the opening of the prayer. The city of Atlantis, according to Plato in the Critias text, has buildings covered with gold because it deserves to be called a city of light, Aram. Or it could be the possibility that the civilization of Atlantis had advanced technology so that it had light technology so that at night the city looked radiant. If we look at the description of the Tower of Babel, the Aad people, from Bible Genesis chapter 11, it is located in a place in the east called Shinar. Try to compare it with the description of Aram in Hebrew, which also means to shine, shine. Meanwhile, the word, Sinar, in the Malay language is similar to the word, Shinar, quoted by the Bible. Even the direction is to the east, assuming that the prophet Noah's ark landed in a place in the Middle East, the east direction from the Middle East leads to the continent of Asia. As written in the book, Euricio Nunes dos Santos, Atlantis the Lost Continent Finally Found, and Dr. Danny Hillman's latest book, Plato No Lying, both of which indicate that Atlantis is located in Indonesia. If we pay attention to the words, did you build on each high ground to play around, in QSC Siwara 128. Actually, this is similar to the description of Atlantis, which also has many plateaus according to Plato in the Critias text. The whole country was said by him to be very lofty and precipitous on the side of the sea. However, the description of the destruction of the people of Aad by wind and lightning is not the same as the description of the destruction of Atlantis by Plato in the Critias text, which is described as occurring in one day by earthquakes and floods. This disaster, in my opinion, is more similar to the disaster that befell the Thamud. They were struck by an earthquake, so they were the corpses that were lying in their dwellings. Surat al-Araf verse 78. According to the Quran, these Thamud were the direct heirs of the Aad people and also acquired their land. And remember when God made you successors, who ruled after the people of Aad and gave you a place on earth. You build palaces on the level ground and cut into the mountains for houses. Then remember the blessings of Allah and do not be rampant on the face of the earth making damage. Surah Al-Araf 74. Thamud's specialties were that they liked to carve mountains to make their homes. Many people think that such buildings exist only in Makkah and Salah, Saudi Arabia, even though there are similar buildings in various parts of the world. Like the prophet Noah, who were scattered throughout the earth, the Aad and Thamud people seemed to be spread globally in all corners of the earth. It is possible that the Aad people were the first generation Atlanteans who were destroyed by the wind, while Thamud were the second generation Atlanteans who were destroyed by an earthquake according to Plato's description in the Critias text. And if we pay attention to the words, you build palaces on the level lands. In Surah al-Araf 74, the words, the flat lands, are similar to Plato's description in the Critias text of the flat plains in Atlantis. And the Critias text also tells how Poseidon turned the hill from the center of the city of Atlantis into a circle of fortresses that flowed water between them. This is in principle the same as Thamud's mountain sculpting skill. Interestingly, there is the legend of Mount Shasta in the US, which tells the story of a civilization left behind by Lemuria, which about 11,000 years ago fled, due to a devastating disaster in Lemuria, to Mount Shasta. It is said that the civilization built an underground city on Mount Shasta. This ability is similar to the ability of Thamud, prophet Salah, as who could carve mountains into a place to live. The disaster that befell Atlantis is estimated to have occurred about 11,000 years ago. This is a very interesting coincidence. Are Lemuria and Atlantis the same? Some sources claim that Atlantis was Lemuria's successor. We know Thamud was the successor of the Aad. Does Lemuria refer to the civilization that was first built by the Aad people? Let's follow the next explanation about Lemuria. Map showing Lemuria at its greatest extent. From the Story of Atlantis and the Lost Lemuria, by W. Scott Elliott. The maps in this book are based on the original document of Theosophist Charles W. Leadbeater. Lemuria. Researchers place the era of the Lemuria civilization around the period 75,000 BC 11,000 BC. The idea that the Lemuria continent existed before the civilizations of Atlantis and ancient Egypt was derived from his explanation of the work of Augustus Le Plongeon (1826–1908), a researcher and writer in the 19th century who conducted research on ancient Mayan sites in Yucatan. This information was obtained after the success of translating several sheets of ancient Mayan records. From the translation results, some information was obtained which showed that the Lemurians were indeed older than their ancestral civilization, Atlantis. Le Plongeon, in the book, The Lost Continent, was later popularized by James Coeur Cord (1851–1936), in a series of books, starting with "Lost Continent of Mu", "The Motherland of Man", 1926, re-edited later as the title, The Lost Continent Mu, 1931. Other popular books in this series are The Children of Mu, 1931, and The Sacred Symbols of Mu, 1933. Churchward gives a clear picture of Mu as an advanced civilization. The Nokal, which flourished between 50,000 and 12,000 years ago, was dominated by the white race, and excelled in many ways. At the time of the collapse, some 12,000 years ago, Mu had reached 64 million inhabitants and was scattered in several major cities. Churchward claims that the mainland Mu lies in the Pacific Ocean, and stretches east-west from Marianas to Easter Island, and north-south from Hawaii to Mangaea. He stated that according to the myth, the creation of the continent and the Mu civilization was due to underground volcanic gas on the seabed which later emerged into the continent. Finally, Mu, due to the natural disaster of this civilization, volcanic, almost disappeared in one-night disaster, after a series of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Churchward claims that Mu is the origin of great civilization from Egypt, Greece, Central America, India, Burma and others, including Easter Island, and in particular the source of ancient megalithic architecture. As evidence for this claim, he points to symbols from around the world, where he sees the common depiction of the bird, as well as the forms that often exist in depictions of the relationship between earth and sky, and especially the sun. Kumari Kondam is a sunken kingdom which is sometimes identified with Lemuria, the result of G. Devanian's observations, in observing the Tamil epic Silappadikaram and Manimekalai and describing the city of Puhar as a submerged Mu civilization. G. Devanian thinks that Ras Dravidia originated from the southern region of what is now the coast of South India, which was sunk by floods. There are various claims by Tamil authors that there is a large landmass connecting Australia to the Tamil Nadu coast. Among them, R. Mathavannan, chief editor of the Tamil Nadu government Tamil Etymology Dictionary Project, in 1991 claimed to have solved the Mu puzzle, based on the Tamil Undecipher Ed Indus manuscript, also following the methodology recommended by his teacher Devania Pavanar. he presented the following timeline, quoted after Mahadevan 2002, 200,000 to 5000 BC. 1. Development of Tamilian or Homo Dravidian, 200,000 to 100,000 BC, beginning of Tamil language 50,000 BC. 2. Kumari Kondam civilization 20,000 BC. 3. A lost Tamil culture, Easter Island which had an advanced civilization of 16,000 BC. 4. Lemuria submerged 6087 BC. 5. Tamil Sangam was founded by King Pandya 3031 BC. 6. A Shera prince wandering in the Solomon Islands saw wild sugarcane and began cultivating in Hadir Tamil Nadu. 1780 BC. 7. Second Tamil Sangam was founded by the 7th century BC King Pandya Tolkapiyam, known as the earliest Tamil grammar. Some Western writers quote about Lemuria. The land of Mu was a huge continent situated in the Pacific Ocean between America and Asia, its center lying somewhat south of the equator. Basing its or on the remains which are still above water, it would have been about 6,000 miles from north to south. All the rocky islands, individually and in groups, scattered over the Pacific Ocean were once part of the continent of Mu. Cataclysmic earthquakes destroyed Mu about 12,000 years ago. The Pacific Ocean rushed in, making a watery grave for a vast civilization and 60 million people. Easter Island, Tahiti, Samoas, Cook, Tongas, Marshall, Gilbert, Caroline, Marianas, Hawaii and the Marquesas are but remnants of that great land. Its free translation. The land of Mu is a large continent in the Pacific Ocean between America and Asia, the center lying slightly south of the equator. Basing the relic on the remains that were still above the water, it would be about 6,000 miles from north to south. All these rocky islands, individuals and groups, scattered in the Pacific Ocean used to be part of the continent of Mu. The catastrophic earthquake destroyed Mu about 12,000 years ago. The Pacific Ocean rushed in, drowned by a water disaster that submerged a vast civilization and killed 60 million people. Easter Island, Tahiti, Samoas, Cook, Tongas, Marshall, Gilbert, Caroline, Marianas, Hawaii and Marquesas are just reminiscent of great lands. Lemuria. Lemuria, Mu, 2008. This is thought to be the oldest civilization on Earth. It is estimated that around 53,000 BC wiped out due to an earthquake due to the shift of the Earth's poles in 24,000 BC. The remains of its civilization are found in Hawaii, as well as in Maya, Inca, Aztec, etc. The depiction of the continent of Mu was found in pre-Inca cuneiform writing, etc. by Dr. Javier Cabrera, was found engraved in ancient rocks in 1972 by many researchers such as Farida Iscoviet, SGT. Willard Wannell, researched Maui in Hawaii and they were sure that the continent of Mu where the Lemurian lived really existed. Lemurian, known as Mu civilization is very advanced, using natural telepathy to communicate. There is even a famous Indian teacher whose name is Sivaya Subramania, who published a book called Lemurian Scrolls. The channeled results of the Lemurian civilization have been very advanced. Many theories about Lemuria are even estimated there is an underwater pyramid around the sea around Okinawa ± 200 feet on the seabed in Japan which is thought to be an ancient relic of the Lemurians. Lemuria, Mu is an ancient civilization that appeared before the civilization of Atlantis. Researchers place the era of the Lemurian civilization around the period 75,000 BC 11,000 BC. The idea of the Lemuria continent existed before the civilization of Atlantis in ancient Egypt. We can get an explanation from a work of Augustus Le Plongeon, 1826-1908, a researcher and writer in the 19th century who conducted research on sites of ancient Mayan heritage sites in Yucatan. This information was obtained after the success of translating several sheets of ancient Mayan records. From the translation results, some information is obtained which shows that the Lemurians are indeed older than their ancestral civilization, Atlantis. However, it is also said that they have lived in the same period of time, before the earthquake and flood disaster, destroyed and drowned the two advanced civilizations of the past. Until now, the location of the Lemuria continent in the past is still a matter of controversy, but based on archaeological evidence and several theories put forward by researchers, it is likely that civilization was located in the Pacific Ocean around Indonesia today. Many archaeologists believe that Easter Island and the Indonesian archipelago are part of the continent of Lemuria. This is when viewed from the hundreds of colossal stone statues that surround the island and some ancient records engraved on several artifacts that refer to the remains of advanced civilizations in the past. The hereditary mythology of the Maori and Samoan tribes who settled in the islands around the Pacific Ocean as well as the islands in Indonesia states that in the past there was a large landmass in the Pacific that was destroyed by the tidal waves of the sea, tsunami, but before that their nation had been destroyed. First, the consequences of war. The state of Lemuria itself is described as being very similar to the civilization of Atlantis, having fertile land, a prosperous society and mastery of several profound branches of science. These factors are of course a basic foundation for the Lemuria nation which has developed more advanced than Atlantis, an advanced civilization and has many experts, scientists who can create a new breakthrough in their science and technology. As many spiritual experts and archaeologists have pointed out, the Lemurian and Atlantean people used crystals intensively in their lives. Edgar Cayce, an American spiritualist through his channeling repeatedly expressed the same thing. The Lemuria site places a giant crystal generator surrounded by other crystals, both as a source of energy and for various healing purposes. Some of the mysterious stone monuments that have been found under the waters of Yonaguni, the Atlanteans who rely more on physics, technology and love to fight, the Lemurians are believed to be humans with a high level of evolution and spirituality, very peaceful and moral. The remains of Lemuria relics found in the Pacific Ocean. According to Edgar Cayce, the emergence of Atlantis as a superpower civilization at that time made them eager to conquer the nations of the world, Lemuria which was seen by the Atlanteans as a strong civilization. Armed with sophisticated war equipment and a good war strategy, Atlantis's invasion of Lemuria went as expected. Due to the nature of the Lemurians who upheld the concept of peace, they were not equipped with war technology like the Atlanteans, so that in an instant Lemuria fell into the hands of Atlantis. The Lemurians who are in a state of urgency, eventually leave the Earth in search of new places to live on other planets that have Earth-like characteristics. Maybe their whereabouts are currently unknown, some say they currently live on the planet Terra in the Pleiades star cluster. Closing parenthesis. German naturalist Ernst Heinrich Haeckel (1834–1919) used Lemuria to explain the early fossil remains of humans. If humans came from a submerged continent in the Indian Ocean, all the fossils from the missing link now exist under the sea. To quote Haeckel, Schlater has given this continent the name Lemuria. Lemuria. He described the Lemurian people as the root of the third race to inhabit the Earth. The Lemurian theory disappeared completely from conventional scientific considerations after the theories of plate tectonics and continental drift were accepted by the larger scientific community. According to plate tectonic theory, currently accepted paradigma in geology, Madagascar and India were originally part of the land. The original landmass of the supercontinent Gondwana, which broke apart, did not sink below sea level. In 1999, drilling by the research vessel JOIDES Resolution in the Indian Ocean found evidence that the large flat island of Kerguelen sank some 20 million years ago by rising sea levels. The samples show physical evidence and fragments of wood in sediments of 90 million years. In 2013, a study of grains of sand from the coast of Mauritius led to the conclusion that similar landmasses existed between 2000 and 85 million years ago. The philosopher Madame Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, the founder of Hebrew etymology, in her book The Secret Doctrine, 1888, confessed to having studied Lemuria in Zian's book. Atlantis and Lemuria deep and interesting truths and facts, potentially of extraordinary importance to humanity, which were revealed for the first time in certain characters written by two Indian Mahatmas from the Trans-Himalayas. Theosophist from the late 19th century. There is much in the first of one letter about the now submerged continents of Atlantis and Lemuria, the fourth and third civilizations of the root race, respectively. Atlantis and Lemuria are popular terms in the New Age movement but are often seriously misunderstood in them.